My daughter-in-law hid my pills, changed my locks, and told a judge I was losing my mind. All to seize my house and lock me away. So I let her win. Played confused, forgot names, stumbled on stairs. She got careless. My cameras caught every word. When she stood in court to declare me incompetent, I played the footage. That was only the first consequence. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. But this story does not begin in a courtroom. It begins on a January morning in Savannah, Georgia, with 1 cup of tea and an empty chair. The light came through my kitchen window, the way it always did in winter. Pale gold filtered through Spanish moss hanging from the live oaks outside, casting soft shadows across the counter where I stood, kettle in hand, waiting for the water to boil. 6:53 in the morning. I had not set an alarm in 7 years, yet my body still woke before dawn. Habit built over 35 years of hospital shifts does not care about retirement. I poured the tea into a single white cup. Chamomile with honey, the way I had taken it every morning since Bill died. He had preferred coffee, black, strong enough to stand a spoon in, he used to say. Every morning for 41 years, I had brewed his coffee and my tea side by side. 2 cups, 2 people. A ritual so ordinary, I never thought to memorize it until it was gone. I carried my cup to the balcony. The wrought iron railing was cold under my free hand. January in Savannah does not freeze the way winter does up north, but it carries a chill that settles into old bones and older memories. I sat in my chair, the wicker one with the faded cushion. Bill's chair sat beside mine, empty. The cushion still held the impression of his weight, though that was probably my imagination after 7 years. Or maybe not. This house remembered things the way people could not. It held every conversation in its walls, every footstep in its floorboards, every laugh and argument and whispered goodnight in its plaster and oak. Our house stood on Abercorn Street in the historic district. An antebellum beauty, Bill had called it when we first saw it 39 years ago. He was a young colonel then, just transferred to Fort Stewart, and I was a nursing student at Savannah Memorial with more ambition than sense. The house was falling apart, roof leaking, porch sagging, magnolia tree in the front yard, half dead from neglect. We bought it with a military loan and a prayer and spent the next decade bringing it back to life. Bill rebuilt the porch himself, sanded every board, sealed every joint, hung the swing where we sat on summer evenings, listening to crickets argue in the garden. I painted the shutters Charleston green, the color of old money and new beginnings. Together, we restored the parlor with its original crown molding, the dining room with its heart pine floors, the kitchen where Bill cooked Sunday breakfast while singing off-key to whatever came on the radio. I sipped my tea and looked through the French doors into the parlor. Bill's reading chair still sat beside the fireplace, his glasses case on the side table, right where he had left it the morning the ambulance came. 7 years, and I could not bring myself to move them. The house remembered, and I helped it. Down the hallway, past the staircase with the creaking 3rd step, was the room that had been James's, our son. I had painted it blue before he was born, hung model airplanes from the ceiling because Bill insisted his boy would love aviation. James never cared for planes. He wanted to be a lawyer. We supported that too. The garden shed out back. Bill's workshop. He had built furniture there on weekends, the bookshelf in the guest room, the dining table we still used, the jewelry box he carved for my 50th birthday with magnolia blossoms etched into the lid. The shed still smelled like sawdust and wood stain. I kept it exactly as he had left it. His tools hanging on pegboard hooks, his workbench scarred with decades of projects, his reading glasses on the shelf beside a half-finished birdhouse he never got to complete. Cancer took him on a Tuesday in June. Lung cancer, though he had never smoked a day in his life. The doctors said sometimes it just happened. Sometimes the body turned against itself for no reason anyone could explain. He spent his last 3 weeks at home, in our bedroom, watching the live oaks through the window. I was his nurse, his wife, his last witness. The morning he died, he held my hand with whatever strength he had left and said, "Take care of the house, Ellie. It remembers everything we built." Then he said something else, quieter, almost lost beneath the sound of the heart monitor. "Every good soldier has a contingency plan. Remember that when you need to." I did not understand the second part. Not then. Not for 7 years. Not until Victoria moved in, and I discovered what my husband had hidden inside a blue envelope. But I am getting ahead of myself. After Bill died, I continued. That is what nurses do. We clock in, we assess, we treat, we move to the next patient. Grief was a patient I tended quietly, in private, between the hours of midnight and dawn, when the house creaked and settled, and sounded almost like breathing. James called every Sunday for the first year, then every other week, then monthly, then only when he needed something, which was often enough to feel regular, just not often enough to feel like love. I walked inside from the balcony, set my cup in the sink, and paused at the hallway wall. The photographs hung in chronological order, left to right. James at 5, gap-toothed and grinning, holding Bill's hand at Forsyth Park. James at 18, graduation cap tilted, future gleaming in his eyes. James at 33, wedding day, standing beside Victoria in her ivory dress. Both of them looking somewhere past the camera, past me, toward something I could not quite see. And Bill. Bill in his dress uniform, 26 years old, the day he proposed to me beside the river at midnight. Bill holding newborn James in the hospital, tears streaming down a face that had never cried in combat. Bill on this very balcony, 60 years old, tea in his hand, laughing at something I said that I could no longer remember no matter how hard I tried. We were happy then. All of us. Before the money became a language. Before generosity became expectation. Before my son forgot that family meant more than transfers and co-signatures and monthly payments that arrived without a thank you attached. My phone sat on the kitchen counter. Silent now. But soon enough it would ring, and the voice on the other end would reshape everything. The phone did ring. Not that morning, but 3 days later, while I was paying bills at the kitchen table with my laptop open and January rain streaking the windows. James. His name lit up my screen the way it always did, with a small flutter in my chest that I had never been able to kill no matter how many times the conversations ended the same way. "Hey, Mom." His voice came through easy, casual, the tone of a man making small talk before making a request. "How are things?" "Fine, honey. Just going through the accounts." "How about you?" "Good, good." Victoria says hi. She did not. Victoria never said hi, unless she wanted something to follow behind it. "Listen, Mom, I hate to ask, but we had an unexpected expense this month. Credit card got a little out of hand over the holidays. Could you maybe help us out? Just $2,500. We will pay it back." They would not pay it back. They had never paid back a single dollar in 7 years. I knew this, the way I knew a patient's vitals were declining before the monitor alarmed. Pattern recognition. 35 years of clinical experience translated into reading people the way most read thermometers. "Of course," I said. "I will transfer it today. You are the best, Mom." Seriously. The call lasted 4 minutes. No questions about my health, my week, whether the house needed repairs, whether I was lonely. Just the request, the gratitude that lasted exactly as long as the transaction, and the click of disconnection. I sat at the table after he hung up, laptop glowing with bank statements I had been reviewing when he called. Not his accounts. Mine. I had been calculating again, the way I did every January when the new year made me reflective and the numbers made me honest. 7 years of support since Bill died. I opened my spreadsheet, the one I kept in a folder labeled Family that should have been labeled Expenditures. James's first law office. $32,000 for the lease, furniture, and initial operating costs. Closed after 14 months. His second attempt. Smaller office. Shared space downtown. $23,000. Closed after 9 months. Victoria's interior design certification course. $11,000. She completed it, hung the certificate, never landed a single client. Down payment on their house in Midtown Savannah. $45,000. From Bill's life insurance, the money meant to carry me through retirement. Private school tuition for the grandchildren, Olivia and Ethan. $2,000 a month. Car insurance for James. Health insurance supplement for the family when James left his firm position to go solo again. Emergency dental work for Victoria. A new roof on their house after the storm 2 summers ago. Christmas gifts that had quietly escalated from thoughtful to expected to demanded. The spreadsheet tallied without emotion. Numbers do not judge, they simply accumulate. $193,000 over 7 years. Plus the ongoing monthly transfers, car insurance, school tuition, their internet bill, because James complained about the cost once and I volunteered to cover it temporarily. That was 4 years ago. Roughly $1,000 a month flowing from my checking account into their comfort. I closed the laptop, opened it again, stared at the total. Nearly $200,000. Most of Bill's life insurance. A significant portion of my pension savings. Money that was supposed to fund my retirement. My security, my independence. Given freely to a son who called every few weeks, and a daughter-in-law who measured my home with her eyes every time she visited. Victoria. I should describe her properly, because you will need to understand what walked through my front door later that month. Victoria Palmer, before she became Victoria Whitfield, grew up in Beaufort, South Carolina. Old enough south to know the manners, young enough to weaponize them, she had a smile that arrived before her intentions did. Warm on the surface, calculated underneath. When she entered a room, she cataloged everything. The furniture, the fixtures, the square footage, the potential. I had watched her do it at family dinners, her gaze moving from the crown molding to the hardwood floors, to the original fireplace mantels with an expression that looked like admiration, but read, to a trained eye, like appraisal. She called James baby in a voice that made decisions sound like suggestions. Baby, maybe we should ask your mom about the school fees. Baby, do you think your mom would mind covering the roof? James repeated these suggestions to me as though they were his own ideas, but I recognized the ventriloquism. Victoria spoke. James's mouth moved. He had not always been this way. As a boy, James had opinions, convictions, a stubborn streak that drove Bill crazy and made me secretly proud. He argued about everything, challenged everything, questioned authority with the confidence of someone who believed he had the right to. Somewhere between law school and marriage, that boy disappeared, replaced by a man who deferred to his wife on every decision, who avoided conflict the way some people avoided illness, instinctively and completely. Victoria did not break him. She simply occupied the space where his spine used to be. And he let her. Because letting her was easier than fighting. I saw it. Bill saw it before he died. That woman is playing chess with our son, he told me once, watching Victoria redirect a Thanksgiving conversation away from a topic she disliked, and James does not even know he is a piece on her board. I had dismissed it then. Mothers-in-law always struggled with the women who took their sons. I told myself I was being unfair, traditional, jealous of the closeness they shared. Bill shook his head but said nothing more. He had planted the seed. It would take 7 years to grow. The rain had stopped by afternoon. I was in the garden, pruning the roses Mama Lou had given me last spring, when my phone rang again. Not James this time, Victoria. Her name on my screen always produced a specific tension in my shoulders, the way a nurse's body tightens when a particular alarm sounds. Not panic. Awareness. Mom. Her voice poured through warm and sweet as peach cobbler. How are you doing? James and I were just talking about you. I am well, Victoria. Thank you for asking. Listen, we have been worried. You are all alone in that big house, and James says you sounded tired on the phone the other day. I had not sounded tired. I had sounded like a woman transferring $2,500 she would never see again. We have been thinking. And please do not say no right away. But what if James and I moved in for a while? Just to be closer. To help around the house. Take some of the burden off your shoulders. The burden. As though living in my own home was a weight I could not carry. As though I needed rescuing from the life I had built and maintained alone for 7 years. That is very thoughtful, I heard myself say. We would handle groceries, cooking, cleaning. You would not have to worry about a thing. And the kids could visit more easily. It would be good for everyone. Good for everyone. I turned the phrase over in my mind, the way I turned soil in the garden, looking for what lay beneath the surface. I should have said no. Should have heard the calculation behind the warmth, the agenda beneath the generosity. Bill would have heard it. Mama Lou would have heard it. But I was 67 years old, living alone in a house built for a family. And my son's wife was offering closeness. Even if the closeness came wrapped in conditions I could not yet see, it was more than I had been offered in years. Let me think about it, I said. Of course, Mom. No pressure at all. I hung up. Stood in the garden with pruning shears in one hand and my phone in the other. The magnolia tree by the front porch, the one Bill and I had nursed back from near death when we first bought the house, caught a gust of wind. A single white petal detached from its branch and drifted down, landing on the porch railing like a small white surrender flag. I should have read it as an omen. Instead, 2 days later, I called Victoria back and said yes. Victoria arrived on a Saturday morning with 4 suitcases, a bouquet of white peonies, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Mom, this place is even more beautiful than I remembered. She stood in the foyer, turning slowly, taking in the crown molding, the original chandelier, the heart pine staircase. Her gaze moved the way it always did, ceiling to floor, corner to corner. Not admiration. Inventory. James carried the bags in silence. He kissed my cheek without meeting my eyes and mumbled something about bringing the rest from the car. He made 3 more trips. Victoria did not carry a single thing. She was too busy arranging the peonies in a crystal vase Bill had given me for our 20th anniversary. There, she said, centering it on the dining table. Already feels like home. Her home. The phrase flickered through my mind and disappeared before I could examine it. The first 2 weeks were a performance worthy of Broadway. Victoria cooked every evening. Shrimp and grits on Monday. Roasted chicken on Wednesday. Her grandmother's peach cobbler on Friday. The kitchen, quiet for 7 years except for my kettle, suddenly smelled like garlic and butter, and something I had almost forgotten. Family. She reorganized the pantry without asking. Moved the spices, replaced my containers with clear glass jars labeled in her handwriting. Small changes, the kind you notice but cannot object to without sounding ungrateful. James mowed the lawn, fixed the dripping faucet, replaced the flickering porch light. He worked steadily and said little. At dinner, he agreed with whatever Victoria suggested. Yes, the house could use new curtains. Yes, the garden needed redesigning. Yes, maybe the shed out back should be cleared out to make room for something useful. The shed. Bill's workshop. I felt my jaw tighten but said nothing. Not right away, of course. Victoria added quickly, touching my hand. Whenever you are ready, Mom. I nodded. Smiled. But I made a note. The way a nurse charts a symptom that does not yet add up to a diagnosis but bears watching. Mornings settled into a pattern. I woke at 6, made my tea, sat on the balcony. Victoria usually appeared by 7, coffee in hand, sitting in Bill's chair as though it had always been hers. The first time she did it, my breath caught. She did not notice. Or pretended not to. By the end of the second week, I had almost convinced myself this arrangement might work. The house felt alive again. Loneliness is a slow poison. And company, even complicated company, felt like medicine. Then Mama Lou came by. Louise Beaumont had lived next door for 22 years. She was 74, built like a fireplace, and spoke her mind the way most people spoke about the weather. She had brought Bill casseroles during his illness, sat with me the night he died, and checked on me every Tuesday and Thursday since. She arrived with a tin of pralines and a look that meant business. Victoria answered the door before I could. "Mrs. Beaumont, how nice of you to stop by." Victoria's hospitality voice, polished, impenetrable. "I am here for Ellie," Mama Lou said, stepping past her without breaking stride. She found me in the kitchen, took my arm. "Walk with me in the garden, outside." Among the roses and azalea bushes, she dropped the pleasantries. "How long they staying?" "They moved in to help me, Lou." "Help?" She repeated the word like tasting something sour. "Ellie, I have watched that woman come and go from this house for 10 years. She does not visit. She inspects. She measures your parlor with her footsteps, not her heart. And your son sits there like a man who has already surrendered to something he cannot name." I pulled a dead leaf from the rose bush. Said nothing. "Be careful, Ellie. That is all I am asking." I walked her to the gate, promised I would, and went back inside where Victoria had started dinner. Lamb chops. My favorite. She had asked James, who mentioned it casually, and Victoria had filed it away the way she filed everything, as information to be deployed at the right moment. "Mama Lou doing okay?" Victoria asked, without looking up from the stove. "She is fine. Just checking in. Sweet woman. So good to have neighbors who care." That night, I went to bed early. The lamb chops sat heavy in my stomach, or maybe it was Mama Lou's words. I lay in the dark, listening to the house settle, the familiar creaks of old wood, adjusting to the presence of new bodies in its rooms. Sleep came slowly, left quickly. I woke at 2:13 in the morning. Not from a dream, from a voice. Victoria's voice, drifting up from the kitchen through the heating vent beside my bed. The same vent that had carried the smell of Bill's Sunday bacon for decades. She was on the phone, speaking low but not low enough. Bigger than I expected, honestly. 4 bedrooms, 3 full baths. The porch wraps all the way around. Original hardwood throughout. Historic district means restrictions, but also premium pricing. We could get at least 2 point. Footsteps. A pause. The refrigerator door. Then silence. I lay in the dark, heart beating against my ribs like a trapped bird. 2 point what? 2.1 million. 2.3. The numbers did not matter. What mattered was the context. The hour. The secrecy. The language of a woman who had moved into my home to help me and was already calculating what it would sell for. Mama Lou's voice echoed in my head. "She measures your parlor with her footsteps, not her heart." I stared at the ceiling Bill had painted twice, once when we moved in and once after James was born, because I wanted a softer shade of white. The ceiling stared back, offering no answers. I told myself I had heard wrong, that maybe Victoria was looking at properties for a friend, for anyone other than herself, standing in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, pricing the house I had lived in for 39 years. I told myself these things because the alternative was too terrible to accept. Not yet. Not when the peonies were still fresh on the table and the illusion of family still intact enough to hold if I did not look too closely. But something had shifted. A crack, thin as a hair, running through the foundation of my trust. And cracks, as any nurse who has watched bones heal will tell you, only get wider under pressure. The back door key did not work on a Tuesday morning. Such a small thing. Such a loud warning. I had gone to the garden to check on the rose bushes Mama Lou had given me, the way I did most mornings before the day turned warm. The back door, the one that opened directly from the kitchen to the garden path, had used the same brass key for 39 years. Bill had replaced the lock once, in 2004, after a break-in attempt on the street. Same key since then. I could find it by touch in the dark. I turned it. Nothing. Tried again. The key slid in but would not catch. The lock had been changed. Victoria appeared behind me before I could try a third time. "Oh, Mom, I forgot to tell you. I had a locksmith come yesterday while you were napping. The old lock was getting stiff. He replaced it with a newer model. Here." She held out a shiny silver key. "This one works." I took it, smiled, said thank you, and made a note. The old lock had not been stiff. I had used it the morning before without trouble. But I said nothing, because one changed lock was not a pattern. Not yet. It was just a symptom, and I had spent a career learning not to diagnose on a single symptom. The second symptom arrived 4 days later. My bank statement, which had come to this address on the 15th of every month for over 2 decades, did not arrive. Neither did the utility bill, nor the property tax notice that should have been in my mailbox by the 20th. I mentioned it at dinner, casually. The way you mention weather or traffic. My bank statement has not come yet. Strange. Victoria did not look up from her plate. "Actually, Mom, I set up a P.O. box for us. Safer than the mailbox on the street. Anyone could steal your mail out there. Identity theft is a real problem these days. A P.O. box, just to be safe. I will pick up the mail every couple of days and sort it for you. One less thing to worry about. One less thing to worry about." The phrase had become Victoria's refrain. She used it like a lullaby, soothing and repetitive, designed to quiet objections before they formed. One less thing, as though my life was a series of burdens being graciously lifted from my shoulders, when in reality, each thing removed was a thread of control pulled from my hands. I turned to James. "Did you know about the P.O. box?" He glanced at Victoria before answering. A reflex so quick most people would miss it. I did not miss it. "Victoria handles the mail now, Mom. Do not worry about it. Do not worry." Another lullaby. I was beginning to hear the melody beneath the words, and it sounded nothing like comfort. 3 days later, Victoria left for the grocery store. James was in the backyard, raking leaves that did not need raking, finding tasks to keep himself visible and useful and far from any conversation that might require him to choose a side. I climbed the stairs to the guest bedroom Victoria and James had taken. The door was closed, but not locked. Inside, their things occupied the space with the same quiet authority Victoria brought to everything. Her clothes organized by color in the closet. James's suits pushed to one end, taking up exactly the amount of room she had allocated for him. I was not proud of what I did next. But pride is a luxury that disappears when you suspect someone is dismantling your life from the inside. The desk in the corner had a shallow drawer. I opened it. Inside, stacked neatly and sorted by date, were my bank statements. 6 of them, going back to October. All opened. All read. Several had numbers underlined in Victoria's handwriting, my savings account balance circled in red. The house's assessed value, pulled from the property tax notice, highlighted in yellow. She had been intercepting my mail for months. Since before they moved in, the P.O. box was not new. It was just newly revealed. I stood in their room, holding statements that should have been in my hands, looking at numbers that represented my life security annotated in another woman's ink. My checking balance, my savings, my pension deposits, my property taxes, which told anyone who could read them exactly what this house was worth on the open market. My hands trembled. Not the tremor of age, which I did not have. The tremor of recognition. I had spent 35 years as a head nurse at Savannah Memorial Hospital. In those years, I had seen things most people only read about in newspapers. I had treated the injuries, filed the reports, testified in the hearings. I had seen families isolate elderly patients from their support systems, redirect their mail, monitor their finances, change the locks on their own homes, control who visited, who called, who had access. I had watched it happen dozens of times, slow and systematic. Each step small enough to explain away individually, but devastating when you saw them together. There was a clinical term for what I was looking at, and a legal one. I put the statements back exactly as I had found them. Closed the drawer. Straightened the chair. Left the room with the door, at the same angle it had been when I entered. 35 years of clinical precision had given me an attention to detail that most people lacked. Victoria would not know I had been here. Downstairs, I poured myself tea I did not want and sat at the kitchen table. The magnolia tree outside the window caught February wind, branches swaying in patterns that looked almost like reaching, like grasping. I had spent my career protecting strangers from exactly this. I had recognized the signs in patients I had known for hours, filed reports that triggered investigations, sat in courtrooms, explaining to judges what isolation and financial exploitation looked like from a clinical perspective. And here it was, in my own home, performed by my own daughter-in-law, enabled by my own son. The locks, the mail, the reorganized pantry, the peonies on the table, the lamb chops and the smiles, and the endless refrain of one less thing to worry about. All of it scaffolding for something I could now see clearly, the way you see the structure of a building once someone removes the decorative facade. They were not here to take care of me. They were here to take everything from me. And the worst part, the part that made my tea grow cold while I sat motionless at the table Bill had built with his own hands, was that I did not yet know what they planned to do next. But I knew how to find out. 35 years of watching, 35 years of documenting, 35 years of seeing what people tried to hide. They had moved into the wrong woman's house. My blood pressure medication vanished on a Wednesday. I kept it in the medicine cabinet above the bathroom sink, same spot for 11 years, right beside the calcium supplements and the bottle of ibuprofen I rarely touched. Every morning at 7:15, after tea, I took one tablet with a glass of water, routine carved so deep into muscle memory that I could do it blindfolded. Wednesday morning, the shelf was empty. The calcium was there. The ibuprofen was there. The blood pressure medication was gone. I checked the counter. The drawer. Behind the mirror. Nothing. Victoria appeared in the bathroom doorway, concern arranged across her face like furniture in a staged home. "Everything okay, Mom? My medication." "I cannot find it." She tilted her head slightly. "Oh no. Did you maybe move it somewhere? You have been a little forgetful lately. Remember last week, you left your reading glasses in the refrigerator." I had not left my reading glasses in the refrigerator. I had set them on the kitchen counter beside the bread box, where I always put them. When I found them in the refrigerator the next morning, I had assumed I was mistaken. Now, I was not so sure. "I will pick up a refill for you this afternoon," Victoria said. "Do not worry about it. One less thing to worry about." She left for the store an hour later. James was in the backyard again, finding invisible tasks among the hedges. I went upstairs to their bathroom, opened the cabinet beneath the sink, behind the cleaning supplies, behind a bottle of bleach and a container of scouring powder no one had used. I found my blood pressure medication. The prescription label faced inward, as though someone had turned it deliberately to hide the name. I held the bottle in my hand. Felt its weight. 23 pills remaining. Enough for 23 days of controlled dosage. Enough to keep my blood pressure stable, my thinking clear, my body functioning the way a 67-year-old body should function when properly medicated. She had hidden my medication, not thrown it away, which would have been too obvious. Hidden it, so that I would appear confused, disoriented, medically unstable, so that when doctors asked questions later, the symptoms would be there. Forgetfulness. Disorganization. Missed doses leading to dizziness. Leading to falls. Leading to a concerned daughter-in-law telling a physician that her mother-in-law was declining rapidly. I put the bottle back exactly where I found it. Label turned inward. Cleaning supplies arranged the same way. Then I went downstairs, through the kitchen, out the back door with Victoria's shiny new key, and walked to Bill's workshop at the far end of the garden. The shed door groaned when I opened it. Inside, the air smelled like sawdust and linseed oil, a scent so specifically Bill that my throat tightened every time. His workbench stretched along the back wall, scarred with saw marks and stain rings. Tools hung on pegboard hooks in the order he had established decades ago. His reading glasses sat on the shelf beside the half-finished birdhouse, lenses dusty, waiting for hands that would never return. I sat on his work stool. The wood was smooth from years of use, shaped to him, accommodating me imperfectly. And I began to connect the pieces the way I had connected symptoms to diagnoses thousands of times in my career. The locks changed to limit my independent access. The mail intercepted to monitor and control my finances. The phone call at 2 in the morning, pricing my house for sale. The reading glasses moved to the refrigerator, creating false evidence of confusion. The medication hidden, engineering medical symptoms that would support a narrative of decline. Each one alone could be explained away. A stiff lock, a safer mailbox, a helpful daughter-in-law. But together, laid out in sequence, they formed a pattern I had seen before, not in textbooks. In hospital rooms, Mrs. Henderson, room 412, 78 years old, admitted for a fall that her son claimed was caused by worsening dementia. I had been her nurse. Something about the bruise patterns did not match a fall. Something about the son's eagerness to discuss long-term care felt rehearsed. I documented everything. Called social services. The investigation revealed the son had been systematically isolating his mother, controlling her medication, manipulating her environment to manufacture symptoms of cognitive decline. All to gain guardianship. All to access her estate. I had saved Mrs. Henderson. Testified in her hearing. Watched the judge deny her son's petition and order a criminal investigation. Now the same architecture was being constructed around me. Different hands. Same blueprint. Victoria was not careless. She was methodical. She had started before they moved in, with the P.O. box and the intercepted mail. The 2 weeks of sweetness had been grooming, establishing herself as caregiver, building a record of concern and devotion. Now she was in the construction phase, manufacturing evidence, building a case. And James, my son, he knew. He might not understand the full scope, but he knew something was wrong, and he had chosen Victoria's direction over his mother's safety. That knowledge settled into my chest like a stone dropped into still water, rippling outward, disturbing everything. Bill's voice came to me then. Not as memory exactly, but as presence. The way his words sometimes surfaced at the moments I needed them most. In chess, Ellie, the player who sees 3 moves ahead always wins. But the player who lets her opponent believe she cannot see the board at all, that player is truly dangerous. He had said it during a game once, years ago, after I had surprised him with a checkmate he never saw coming. He laughed for 10 minutes, told the story at every dinner party for a year, 3 moves ahead. Victoria thought she was 3 moves ahead. She thought she was playing against a confused old woman who could not find her own medication. She was wrong. I could confront her. Walk inside, slam the pill bottle on the counter, demand explanations, call the police, call a lawyer. It would feel satisfying for approximately 5 minutes. Then she would deny everything. James would take her side. They would leave, regroup, and come back with a different strategy. Smarter, harder to detect. No. Confrontation was a losing move. The winning move was patience. The winning move was letting her believe her plan was working while I built something she could not see. I stood up from Bill's stool, looked at his tools hanging in their perfect order, picked up the pencil he had kept on his workbench, and in a small notebook I found in the drawer, I wrote the date and 6 words. The game begins. I play along. Then I walked back to the kitchen, waited for Victoria to return from the store, and when she handed me the refill medication with that warm, practiced smile, I took it with hands I let tremble slightly. "Thank you, dear," I said, letting my voice waver just enough. I cannot remember where I put the other bottle. My mind has been so foggy lately. Her eyes brightened. Just a flicker. Just enough for a trained nurse to see. "It is okay, Mom. That is why we are here." "Yes," I thought, returning her smile with one that hid everything I knew and everything I planned. "That is exactly why you are here. And you have no idea what that is going to cost you." My blood pressure medication vanished on a Wednesday. I kept it in the medicine cabinet above the bathroom sink. Same spot for 11 years, right beside the calcium supplements and the bottle of ibuprofen I rarely touched. Every morning at 7:15, after tea, I took 1 tablet with a glass of water. Routine carved so deep into muscle memory that I could do it blindfolded. Wednesday morning, the shelf was empty. The calcium was there. The ibuprofen was there. The blood pressure medication was gone. I checked the counter. The drawer. Behind the mirror. Nothing. Victoria appeared in the bathroom doorway, concern arranged across her face like furniture in a staged home. "Everything okay, Mom?" "My medication. I cannot find it." She tilted her head slightly. "Oh no. Did you maybe move it somewhere? You have been a little forgetful lately. Remember last week, you left your reading glasses in the refrigerator." I had not left my reading glasses in the refrigerator. I had set them on the kitchen counter beside the bread box, where I always put them. When I found them in the refrigerator the next morning, I had assumed I was mistaken. Now, I was not so sure. "I will pick up a refill for you this afternoon," Victoria said. "Do not worry about it. One less thing to worry about." She left for the store an hour later. James was in the backyard again, finding invisible tasks among the hedges. I went upstairs to their bathroom, opened the cabinet beneath the sink, behind the cleaning supplies, behind a bottle of bleach and a container of scouring powder. The prescription label faced inward, as though someone had turned it deliberately to hide the name. I held the bottle in my hand, felt its weight. 23 pills remaining. Enough for 23 days of controlled dosage. Enough to keep my blood pressure stable, my thinking clear, my body functioning the way a 67-year-old body should function when properly medicated. She had hidden my medication, not thrown it away, which would have been too obvious. Hidden it, so that I would appear confused, disoriented, medically unstable, so that when doctors asked questions later, the symptoms would be there. Forgetfulness, disorganization, missed doses leading to dizziness, leading to falls, leading to a concerned daughter-in-law telling a physician that her mother-in-law was declining rapidly. I put the bottle back exactly where I found it. Label turned inward. Cleaning supplies arranged the same way. Then I went downstairs, through the kitchen, out the back door with Victoria's shiny new key, and walked to Bill's workshop at the far end of the garden. The shed door groaned when I opened it. Inside, the air smelled like sawdust and linseed oil. A scent so specifically Bill that my throat tightened every time. His workbench stretched along the back wall, scarred with saw marks and stain rings. Tools hung on pegboard hooks in the order he had established decades ago. His reading glasses sat on the shelf beside the half-finished birdhouse, lenses dusty, waiting for hands that would never return. I sat on his work stool. The wood was smooth from years of use, shaped to him, accommodating me imperfectly, and I began to connect the pieces the way I had connected symptoms to diagnoses thousands of times in my career. The locks changed to limit my independent access. The mail intercepted to monitor and control my finances. The phone call at 2 a.m, pricing my house for sale. The reading glasses moved to the refrigerator, creating false evidence of confusion. The medication hidden. engineering medical symptoms that would support a narrative of decline. Each one, alone, could be explained away. A stiff lock, a safer mailbox, a helpful daughter-in-law. But together, laid out in sequence, they formed a pattern I had seen before. Not in textbooks. In hospital rooms, Mrs. Henderson. Room 412. 78 years old. Admitted for a fall that her son claimed was caused by worsening dementia. I had been her nurse. Something about the bruise patterns did not match a fall. Something about the son's eagerness to discuss long-term care felt rehearsed. I documented everything. Called social services. The investigation revealed the son had been systematically isolating his mother, controlling her medication, manipulating her environment to manufacture symptoms of cognitive decline. All to gain guardianship. All to access her estate. I had saved Mrs. Henderson. Testified in her hearing. Watched the judge deny her son's petition and order a criminal investigation. Now the same architecture was being constructed around me. Different hands. Same blueprint. Victoria was not careless. She was methodical. She had started before they moved in. With the P.O. box and the intercepted mail. The 2 weeks of sweetness had been grooming, establishing herself as caregiver, building a record of concern and devotion. Now she was in the construction phase. Manufacturing evidence. Building a case. And James. My son. He knew. He might not understand the full scope, but he knew something was wrong, and he had chosen Victoria's direction over his mother's safety. That knowledge settled into my chest like a stone dropped into still water, rippling outward, disturbing everything. Bill's voice came to me then, not as memory exactly, but as presence. The way his words sometimes surfaced at the moments I needed them most. In chess, Ellie. The player who sees 3 moves ahead always wins. But the player who lets her opponent believe she cannot see the board at all, that player is truly dangerous. He had said it during a game once, years ago. After I had surprised him with a checkmate he never saw coming. He laughed for 10 minutes. Told the story at every dinner party for a year. 3 moves ahead. Victoria thought she was 3 moves ahead. She thought she was playing against a confused old woman who could not find her own medication. She was wrong. I could confront her. Walk inside, slam the pill bottle on the counter, demand explanations, call the police, call a lawyer. It would feel satisfying for approximately 5 minutes. Then she would deny everything. James would take her side. They would leave. No. Confrontation was a losing move. The winning move was patience. The winning move was letting her believe her plan was working while I built something she could not see. I stood up from Bill's stool, looked at his tools hanging in their perfect order, picked up the pencil he had kept on his workbench, and in a small notebook I found in the drawer, I wrote the date and 6 words. The game begins. I play along. Then I walked back to the kitchen, waited for Victoria to return from the store, and when she handed me the refill medication with that warm, practiced smile, I took it with hands I let tremble slightly. "Thank you, dear," I said, letting my voice waver just enough. I cannot remember where I put the other bottle. My mind has been so foggy lately. Her eyes brightened. Just a flicker. Just enough for a trained nurse to see. "It is okay, Mom. That is why we are here." Yes, I thought, returning her smile with one that hid everything I knew and everything I planned. That is exactly why you are here. And you have no idea what that is going to cost you. Over the next 2 weeks, I perfected my performance the way I had once perfected clinical assessments. With precision, attention to detail, and 0 room for error. The key was calibration. Too little confusion, and Victoria would lose interest, slow her timeline, maybe even reconsider. Too much and she might panic, call an ambulance, trigger an emergency evaluation I could not control. I needed to stay in the narrow band between concerning and catastrophic, enough to feed her confidence, not enough to force her hand prematurely. Monday. Victoria did not look up from her phone, but her thumb stopped scrolling. Listening. Cataloging. Wednesday. I put my house keys in the freezer, tucked between a bag of frozen peas and a container of chicken stock. Victoria found them that afternoon, while making dinner. She held them up with a look of staged concern, so practiced it could have come with stage directions. "Mom, your keys were in the freezer. Were they?" I touched my forehead. Let my hand tremble slightly. I must have been looking for something and got mixed up. Her notebook appeared within the hour. New entry. I did not need to read it to know what it said. Friday. I put my blouse on inside out, walked through the kitchen, and sat at the table for 20 minutes before Victoria gently pointed it out. I looked down at the exposed seams with an expression I had spent the previous evening rehearsing in the bathroom mirror. Genuine bewilderment. The kind that lives in the space between knowing something is wrong and not being able to identify what. "Oh my," I said. "I did not even notice." "It happens, Mom." Victoria's voice carried that specific frequency of performed tenderness. The same tone I had heard nurses use with patients they did not actually care about but needed to appear compassionate toward for the chart notes. I recognized it the way a musician recognizes a wrong note in a familiar song. Instantly. Viscerally. The following Tuesday, Mama Lou came to visit. I heard her voice at the front door from the kitchen where I was washing dishes I had already washed once, another performance, running the sponge over clean plates with the mechanical repetition of someone operating on habit rather than thought. "Afternoon, Victoria. I brought Ellie some of my lemon squares." "Oh, Mrs. Beaumont, that is so sweet. But Mom is having a bad day. She has been confused since this morning, and I think visitors might overstimulate her. You know how it is." My hands stilled in the dishwater. Overstimulate. A clinical word. Deliberately chosen. Victoria was not just blocking a visitor. She was establishing a pattern of isolation using medical language that would sound responsible to anyone who was not paying close attention. "I would like to see her anyway," Mama Lou said. Her voice carried the particular steel of a Southern woman who had been told no and found the word insufficient. "Maybe tomorrow would be better. I will have her call you when she is feeling more like herself." A pause. Then footsteps retreating down the porch steps. Mama Lou leaving without seeing me. For the first time since this began, I felt a flash of something hotter than strategy. Anger. Raw and immediate. Like touching a stove element you did not know was on. Victoria was cutting me off from the one person outside this house who truly knew me. The one witness who could look into my eyes and see that nothing was wrong. That was not careless. That was surgical. I swallowed the anger, filed it away, returned to washing the clean dishes. That evening, Victoria made a phone call from the living room. She did not bother going to the kitchen or lowering her voice. Confidence makes people careless, and Victoria was brimming with it. "Yes, Dr. Reeves. Thank you for returning my call. It is about my mother-in-law, Eleanor Whitfield. We have been living with her for about 6 weeks now, and we have noticed some concerning changes." She paused. Listening. Yes. Repeated questions. Misplacing objects in unusual locations. Difficulty with routine tasks. She put her keys in the freezer last week and could not remember doing it. She has also been confusing names. Called her son by her deceased husband's name. Another pause. Her voice dropped into a register of practiced grief. It has been gradual but definitely accelerating. We are worried about her safety. She left the stove on twice last month. We just want to make sure she is evaluated properly, so we can get her the help she needs. The help she needs. Each word a brick in the wall she was building. Each symptom she listed one I had manufactured deliberately. Fed to her like bait on a hook. Now being presented to a medical professional as evidence of decline. I sat in the hallway, just out of sight, listening to my daughter-in-law construct a medical narrative from fiction, watching her transform my performance into her ammunition, and feeling beneath the anger and the strategy and the patience, a strange kind of admiration for the architecture of it. Victoria was good at this. She was organized, thorough, convincing. She had done research. She knew the vocabulary. She knew which symptoms to emphasize and which to hold back for later. She was building a case the way a prosecutor builds an argument, piece by piece, witness by witness, document by document. And she believed, with the absolute certainty of someone who has never been outplayed, that no one in this house could see what she was doing. That night in the workshop, I wrote everything down. The call to Dr. Reeves, the blocking of Mama Lou, the escalating documentation. Then I closed my notebook and sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about timelines. Victoria had called a psychiatrist. That meant an evaluation was coming. A professional would walk into my home, clipboard in hand, and attempt to determine whether Eleanor Whitfield was losing her mind or being managed by someone who wanted it to appear that way. I had played this role for 6 weeks. Convincingly enough to fool my own son. Convincingly enough to generate a notebook full of symptoms and a phone call to a psychiatrist. Now I needed to play it once more. For the doctor. Give him just enough to confirm Victoria's concerns without triggering an immediate intervention. Thread the needle between decline and emergency. Let the evaluation proceed. Let Victoria believe she was one step closer to her goal. And then, when the moment was right, stop performing entirely. The doctor would see a confused old woman. The judge, when the time came, would meet someone else entirely. Dr. Reeves arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Pressed khakis, wire-rimmed glasses, a leather briefcase worn soft at the corners. He shook my hand with the calibrated gentleness of a man who had been told his patient was fragile. His grip said careful. His eyes said assessment. Mrs. Whitfield, I am Dr. Reeves. How are you feeling today? Fine, I think. I let a small hesitation live in the pause between words. Not too long. Just enough to suggest uncertainty was my baseline. Would you like some tea? That would be lovely. Victoria hovered in the kitchen doorway while I made the tea. She had dressed for the occasion, modest blouse, minimal jewelry. The costume of a devoted daughter-in-law burdened by concern. She had even dabbed her eyes with something before Reeves arrived. The faint redness suggested recent tears, or at least the appearance of them. She has good days and bad days. Victoria told him, while I fumbled deliberately with the tea bags, choosing the wrong canister twice before finding the chamomile. Today seems like a better day, actually. But the bad ones are getting more frequent. Reeves nodded. Made a note. They always made notes. We sat in the parlor. Reeves opened his briefcase, produced a clipboard with printed forms. Standard cognitive evaluation. I had administered versions of this test myself hundreds of times as a nurse. I knew every question, every scoring metric, every threshold that separated normal from concerning from urgent. Can you tell me today's date, Mrs. Whitfield? I paused, looked toward the window, as though the answer might be hiding in the live oaks. March, I said slowly. March something. The 15th? No, that was last week. It was the 12th. I knew this with absolute precision. I gave him the 14th. Close enough to seem like a near miss rather than complete disorientation. And can you tell me your date of birth? September 3rd, 1958. No hesitation. Real patients with early cognitive decline often retained long-term memories while losing short-term ones. I needed to mirror that pattern accurately. Very good. Now, I am going to ask you to draw a clock face for me. Show the time as 2:45. The clock drawing test. I could complete this perfectly in my sleep. Instead, I drew the circle slightly oblong, placed the numbers correctly, but let the 2 and the 3 drift closer together than they should, and drew the hour hand pointing to the 2 with a slight waver that suggested motor uncertainty rather than cognitive failure. The minute hand I placed correctly on the 9, enough accuracy to avoid immediate alarm, enough imperfection to feed the narrative. Reeves studied the drawing. Made another note. Mrs. Whitfield, can you tell me about something you did yesterday? Yesterday, I began a story about gardening, then stopped midway. Let my eyes drift. Picked up a different thread about making tea. Stopped again. I am sorry. What were we talking about? Reeves glanced at Victoria. She gave him a look of practiced sorrow. The exchange lasted less than a second, but I caught it the way I caught irregular heart rhythms on a monitor. Two people confirming a shared conclusion without words. The evaluation continued for another 20 minutes. Word recall tests, where I deliberately missed 2 out of 5 items. A serial subtraction exercise, where I made one error, then corrected it, then made another. Each mistake placed precisely in the territory between normal aging and early decline. Not enough to trigger an emergency. Plenty to justify concern. When Reeves packed up his briefcase, he thanked me warmly and told me I was doing very well for my age. The kind of reassurance doctors offered when they planned to write something very different in their reports. Victoria walked him to the door. I stayed in the parlor, listening through the heating vent that carried sound from the foyer the way it carried it from the kitchen. Thank you for coming, doctor. What do you think? I will need to complete my formal assessment, but there are indicators consistent with early-stage cognitive decline. I would recommend a follow-up evaluation in 3 to 4 weeks to establish a trend line. If the pattern continues, we can discuss next steps regarding care planning. Care planning. Victoria's voice contained something I recognized. Not concern. Appetite. Thank you, doctor. We just want to make sure she is safe. The front door closed. Footsteps in the hallway. Then Victoria's voice. Lower now. Aimed at James somewhere nearby. One more evaluation. That is all we need. One more and we file. File. The word landed in my chest like a fist. File meant paperwork. File meant guardianship. Petition. File meant a judge deciding whether Eleanor Whitfield could manage her own life, or whether that right would be handed to the woman who had hidden her medication and changed her locks and intercepted her mail. I sat in the parlor until their footsteps retreated upstairs. Then I stood, walked to the hallway bathroom, locked the door, and looked in the mirror. The woman looking back had none of the confusion I had performed for the past hour. Her eyes were clear, sharp, focused. Her jaw was set. Her hands were steady. This was the real Eleanor. The one Victoria had never seen and could never be allowed to see. Not yet. I gripped the edges of the sink. Reeves would write his report. Victoria would schedule the follow-up. 3 to 4 weeks, he had said. That was my window. After the second evaluation, they would file. After they filed, the legal machinery would begin turning. And once it started, stopping it would become exponentially harder. I needed to move faster. The performances had served their purpose. Victoria was convinced. Reeves was documenting. The trap was set from their side. Now I needed to set mine. That night, I waited until the house was dark. Until Victoria's breathing settled into the rhythm of sleep. I could hear through the heating vent. Until James's footsteps stopped pacing in the guest bedroom and the house fell into the particular silence of midnight. I walked to the garden shed, closed the door, turned on the small lamp Bill had wired to a car battery for late-night projects, and made 2 phone calls. The first went to a security company in Savannah that specialized in discreet surveillance equipment. I spoke quietly, efficiently. 4 wireless cameras, motion-activated, with remote viewing capability, small enough to be concealed in household objects. Delivered within 3 business days. I gave them my credit card number from memory, the one Victoria did not know about, the account I had opened 2 weeks ago at a different bank specifically for this purpose. The second call required more courage. I reached into the shelf above Bill's workbench, where his reading glasses still sat beside the unfinished birdhouse, and pulled down our family Bible. Heavy, leather-bound, the pages edged in gold that had faded to bronze over decades. I opened the front cover. There, in Bill's handwriting, precise and deliberate, as everything he did, was a phone number and a name. Judge Arthur Harrison. Retired. The phone rang 4 times. A voice answered, deep and unhurried. The voice of a man who had spent decades speaking in courtrooms and was no longer in any rush. This is Arthur Harrison. Arthur, it is Eleanor Whitfield, Bill's wife. A pause, then warmth, recognition, and something else. Readiness. Ellie, Bill told me this day might come. When can you get away? The cameras arrived in a plain brown box 3 days later. Delivered while Victoria was at the grocery store and James was pretending to fix something in the garage that did not need fixing. I carried the box to the workshop, opened it on Bill's workbench, with hands that were perfectly steady. 4 units. Each no bigger than a walnut, matte black, wireless, motion activated, with a battery life of 72 hours between charges. The instruction manual was 12 pages long. I read it in 9 minutes. 35 years of learning new medical equipment had made me efficient with technical documentation. The cameras connected to a tablet application. I had purchased a small iPad 2 days prior, paying cash at a store across town where nobody knew me. It sat now in the bottom drawer of Bill's workbench, hidden beneath sandpaper and wood shavings, next to the notebook where I documented Victoria's campaign against my independence. Installation required precision and speed. Victoria's grocery trips lasted approximately 90 minutes, depending on whether she stopped for coffee, which she usually did. I had 60 minutes of safe working time. Enough if I did not hesitate. Camera 1 went inside the ceramic magnolia figurine on the parlor mantel. Bill had bought it for me at a craft fair in Tybee Island 20 years ago. White petals, hand-painted, roughly 8 inches tall with a hollow center designed to hold a tea light candle. I removed the candle, positioned the camera lens behind a small gap between 2 petals, and secured it with a piece of putty that matched the ceramic interior. From the outside, the figurine looked exactly as it always had. From the inside, it could see the entire parlor, the front door, and the hallway entrance. Camera 2 went into the picture frame on the kitchen wall. A photograph of Bill and me at Fort Stewart, 1987. Both of us young enough to believe that hard work and love would protect us from everything. I removed the backing, mounted the camera behind a small hole I drilled in the top edge of the frame using Bill's hand drill, and replaced the backing with the lens positioned to capture the kitchen table, the counter, and the doorway to the living room. Camera 3 went into the sugar bowl on the dining room sideboard. Victoria never used it. She did not take sugar in her tea. The bowl was decorative, part of a set Bill's mother had given us as a wedding gift. I angled the camera upward slightly, giving it a view of the dining room, and through the open archway, the living room where Victoria made most of her phone calls. Camera 4 required more creativity. I placed it inside a dried flower arrangement on the bookshelf in the living room, threading the lens between silk hydrangeas that had been gathering dust since the last time I redecorated, which was long enough ago that Victoria would never think to examine them. I tested each camera from the iPad in the workshop. 4 feeds, 4 angles, 4 silent witnesses positioned throughout my home. The motion activation worked perfectly. When I walked through the parlor, Camera 1 captured my movement in clear resolution. When I opened the refrigerator, Camera 2 recorded every second. Victoria's car pulled into the driveway at 11:43. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and the television playing a program I was not watching. The picture of harmless routine. She carried grocery bags inside, chatted about prices and weather, and moved through rooms where 4 cameras tracked her every step without her knowing. The magnolia figurine watched from the mantel. The picture frame watched from the wall, the sugar bowl watched from the sideboard, and Bill's wife watched from behind the mask of confusion, counting the hours until these silent witnesses would capture something that could not be denied. 2 days later, I went to see Arthur Harrison. The escape required planning. Victoria had developed the habit of tracking my movements with the attentiveness of a warden. If I was in the garden, she checked every 15 minutes. If I was in the parlor, she appeared with tea or a blanket or some small gesture of care that doubled as surveillance. Leaving the house unaccompanied had become nearly impossible without raising suspicion. I chose a Saturday morning when Victoria had scheduled a phone call with her sister. These calls lasted at least an hour and consumed her attention completely. I told James I wanted to walk to the corner, just to the mailbox and back, the way I used to. "Should Victoria go with you?" he asked. "James, I am walking 200 feet. I think I can manage." He hesitated. Guilt flickered across his face like a shadow passing over shallow water. Then he nodded. "Okay, Mom. Be careful." I walked to the corner, then kept walking. 3 blocks to Abercorn and 37th, where I had called a taxi 20 minutes earlier from the workshop phone. The driver took me to an address on Victory Drive, a neighborhood of brick homes and mature pecans, where retired professionals lived quiet lives behind well-maintained hedges. Arthur Harrison opened his door with the posture of a man who had spent decades in uniform. Straight-backed, clear-eyed, 72 years old, and carrying every one of those years like medals earned rather than burdens accumulated. "Ellie." He took both my hands. His grip was warm and sure. "Come in." His study smelled like leather and old books. Framed photographs lined the walls. Harrison in uniform beside Bill, both of them young and serious. Harrison on the bench, in his judge's robes. A signed photograph of his unit, faded but prominent above the desk. I told him everything. The locks, the mail, the medication, the gaslighting, the performances, the doctor, the notebook. I spoke for 20 minutes without interruption, laying out the evidence the way I would present a patient history to a physician. Chronological, clinical, thorough. Harrison listened the way soldiers listen to field reports. Without expression, without interruption, absorbing data, processing implications, calculating responses. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me for a long moment. Bill told me once, about a year before he died, that he was worried about James. Not about his character exactly, but about his weakness. He said James had married a woman who thought in terms of assets and leverage, and that one day she would see you as both. He was right. He usually was. Harrison stood, walked to a safe built into the wall behind a painting of the Savannah waterfront, dialed the combination. The door swung open. Bill gave me something the week before he died. An envelope. Blue. Sealed. He made me promise 2 things. First, do not open it until Ellie needs it. Second. Harrison paused, holding the envelope in both hands like something consecrated. If it is James doing this, do not go easy. He held it out to me. I reached for it. He pulled it back slightly. Not here, Ellie. Not yet. I need to review it properly, within the legal framework, so that whatever is inside can be used correctly. Bring me the original trust documents, the ones Bill kept. Do you know where they are? The fireproof box in his closet. Victoria has not found it. She does not know about it. Good. Bring them to me. Then we opened the envelope together. I took a taxi home. Victoria was still on her call when I walked through the front door, slightly winded, cheeks flushed from the March air. James met me in the hallway. "Long walk, Mom." I sat on the bench by the square for a while. I said, letting my voice carry the weariness of a woman who had overexerted herself on a simple outing. Watched the birds. Lost track of time. He studied me. For a moment, something moved behind his eyes. A question he almost asked. Then it retreated, and he patted my shoulder and went back to whatever small task Victoria had assigned him. I walked past the magnolia figurine on the mantel. Its camera eye caught my movement as I passed. Upstairs, behind the closet door in the bedroom, Bill and I had shared for 39 years. A fireproof box sat on the top shelf, undisturbed, holding documents that would determine everything. Harrison was waiting. The blue envelope was waiting. And Victoria, making plans in the living room below me, had no idea that the walls of this house were no longer just listening. They were recording. I retrieved the trust documents on a Monday morning while Victoria was in the shower and James was drinking coffee with his back to the stairs. The fireproof box sat on the top shelf of Bill's closet, exactly where he had placed it years ago. Heavy, gray, unremarkable. Victoria had reorganized much of the house since moving in, but she had not touched this closet. Perhaps she considered it too personal. More likely, she had not gotten to it yet. I opened it with the small key I kept in my jewelry case, disguised among earring backs and broken clasps. Inside, stacked with military precision, were the documents Bill had left behind. Marriage certificate, the deed, insurance papers long since expired, and at the bottom, bound with a rubber band that had lost its elasticity, the trust. The William and Eleanor Whitfield Living Trust, dated 14 years ago, revised once, 7 years ago, 3 weeks before Bill died. The revision date caught my attention. He had not told me about changes that close to the end, but Bill had always operated on a need-to-know basis, a habit the Army drilled into him, and civilian life never fully removed. I slid the documents into a manila envelope, placed it in my gardening tote beneath gloves and a seed catalog, and carried it downstairs. Victoria glanced up from her phone. "Going outside, Mom? Thought I would check on the roses. Take a jacket." Still cool in the mornings. I took a jacket, walked through the garden to the workshop, called a taxi, and 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Arthur Harrison's study, the manila envelope on the desk between us. Harrison examined the trust with the thoroughness of a man who had spent 40 years reading legal documents. He turned pages slowly, running his finger along clauses and subclauses, occasionally stopping to reread a paragraph with his glasses pushed to the tip of his nose. I sat across from him, hands folded, watching morning light catch dust particles floating between us. His study was quiet, except for turning pages and the distant ticking of a grandfather clock. Patient sounds. Sounds that understood waiting. "Bill revised this 3 weeks before he passed," Harrison said without looking up. I noticed. No surprise he kept it to himself. Harrison removed his glasses. "Set them on the desk. Ellie, do you know what a duress provision is? Generally, a clause that activates if someone is forced to act against their will." "Correct." Bill added one in that final revision. Specific, detailed, and deliberate as a military operation. He reached into his desk drawer and produced the blue envelope. It sat between us on the mahogany surface, Bill's handwriting across the front in black ink. "For Ellie. When she needs it." Harrison slid it toward me. "Together. As I promised." I opened the envelope. My fingers, steady through every performance of the past 2 months, trembled now. Not from acting, from the weight of what my husband had prepared while cancer consumed his body. While I adjusted his morphine and held his hand through the night, he had been planning, protecting. Inside was a single typed page, signed by Bill and witnessed by Harrison. I read it silently, then Harrison read it aloud, his courtroom voice filling the study with words my husband had written from the edge of death. Addendum to the William and Eleanor Whitfield Living Trust. Anti-duress provision. Should Eleanor Grace Whitfield be subjected to any competency evaluation, guardianship petition, or conservatorship filing initiated by any beneficiary of this trust, the following provisions shall activate immediately. All assets held within the trust, including the property at 417 Abercorn Street, Savannah, Georgia, shall be irrevocably transferred to the Savannah Veterans Foundation. The petitioning party shall be permanently disinherited from all trust assets. This provision may not be amended, revoked, or contested by any party other than Eleanor Grace Whitfield herself, while of sound mind. The words settled into the room like stones dropped into deep water, each one sinking, sending ripples through everything I had been enduring. Bill had known. Not the specifics, perhaps. Not that it would be Victoria with her notebooks and her sugar-coated ambition. But he had known the shape of the threat, had seen in James the weakness that would allow it, had understood that love without boundaries was an invitation, and had built a wall around me from his deathbed. I pressed the page against my chest, closed my eyes. And for the first time since Victoria moved into my house, I cried. Not the performative confusion I had been displaying for weeks. Real tears. The kind that came from a place so deep they bypassed thought entirely, and arrived as grief and gratitude tangled together so tightly I could not separate them. Bill, who had spent his last lucid days building fortifications instead of saying goodbye, who had whispered every good soldier has a contingency plan and meant it literally, who had trusted Harrison with an envelope and trusted me to find my way to it. Harrison said nothing while I cried. He sat in his leather chair, hands folded, giving me the silence the moment required. When I opened my eyes, he was pouring bourbon into 2 glasses. He slid one across the desk. Bill was the finest strategist I ever served with, Harrison said. He did not just protect you. He anticipated every variable. If James or anyone else files a guardianship petition, they do not just lose the case, they lose everything. House, inheritance. Gone to the Veterans Foundation the moment the petition is stamped. They do not know. No. And they will not until they have already filed. The clause activates upon filing, not upon ruling. By the time a judge sees the petition, the trap has already closed. He raised his glass. Bill designed this the way he designed field operations. No escape route for the enemy. I raised mine. The bourbon was smooth and warm, and tasted like something Bill would have chosen. To Bill, I said. To Bill. The old colonel is still fighting, Ellie. Even from the grave. Silence held between us. The grandfather clock ticked. Sunlight shifted across the blue envelope. Now, Harrison said, setting his glass down with a decisive click. Your cameras are recording. The trust activates the moment they file. Every piece of evidence you collect strengthens the criminal case for elder abuse. We let Victoria build her case, file her petition, and walk straight into the trap Bill built 7 years ago. And if she does not file, she will. Women like Victoria do not stop this close to what they want. She has invested months. He paused. The question is whether you can keep performing until she does. I looked at the blue envelope, at Bill's handwriting, at words he had written while his body was failing, and his mind was still sharp enough to see around corners into a future he would not witness. I can perform as long as necessary, I said. I have been a nurse for 35 years. Patience is not a skill I learned. It is who I am. Harrison smiled. The first real smile I had seen from him. Bill said you would say that. The cameras began their silent work. And Victoria, believing she lived among a confused old woman and a compliant husband, spoke freely. I reviewed the footage every night in the workshop after the house went dark. The iPad glowed in the dim shed like a window into a world I was not supposed to see. Bill's tools hung on the wall above me, patient witnesses to their owner's wife learning just how far betrayal could reach. Recording 3 arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. Camera 2, the kitchen frame. Victoria stood at the counter, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in the bright, professional voice she reserved for people she wanted something from. Hi. This is Victoria Whitfield. I am calling about a property evaluation. 417 Abercorn Street, Historic District, Antebellum. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths. Wraparound porch. Original hardwood throughout. She paused. Listened. Yes. The lot includes a detached workshop and a mature garden. We are looking at comparable sales in the area to understand current market positioning. Market positioning. The phrase hung in the kitchen air like smoke. She was not asking out of curiosity. She was asking because she needed numbers. Numbers to plan around, numbers to divide, numbers to spend. Wonderful. If you could send that analysis to my email, I would appreciate it. We are not quite ready to list yet, but we want to be prepared when the time comes. When the time comes. She said it the way someone might say when the rain stops or when dinner is ready. As though the seizure of another person's home was simply a matter of scheduling. Recording 7. The following Monday. Camera 3. The sugar bowl in the dining room. Capturing the living room through the archway. Victoria on the sofa, laptop open. Phone wedged between her shoulder and ear. Yes, I am inquiring about availability. Shady Oaks Assisted Living. We need a room for my mother-in-law. A pause. Semi-private is fine. She has early onset cognitive decline. Her doctor has been evaluating her, and we expect to have formal documentation within the next few weeks. Another pause. Long-term? Yes. Probably permanent. Permanent. The word hit me like a closed fist. She was not planning temporary care, not a respite stay, or an evaluation period. She was reserving a room for the rest of my life in a facility I had never visited, never consented to, never been told about. I paused the recording, sat in the dark workshop, breathed, resumed. Recording 12. Thursday evening. Camera 1, the magnolia figurine in the parlor. Victoria on the phone, feet tucked under her on the sofa, a glass of wine in her free hand. Relaxed, unguarded, the posture of a woman who believed she was alone with her plans. Girl, this house is unbelievable. You should see the woodwork. The fireplace mantels alone are probably worth more than our apartment. 4 bedrooms. The garden is gorgeous, and the location is prime historic district. She laughed. I know, right? Once she is settled in the home, we gut the kitchen first. Open concept. Then the bathrooms. Stage it properly, and we are looking at 2.1, maybe 2.3 with the right buyer. Once she is settled in the home. The casual cruelty of the phrasing. As though placing me in a nursing home was no different from storing furniture in a warehouse. A logistical step before the renovation could begin. She continued. James is on board. Took some convincing, but he gets it now. His mom is not doing well, and this is the responsible thing. Plus, we cannot keep living like this forever. We need our own place, and this house is basically our inheritance anyway. Our inheritance. The word twisted in my chest. Inheritance implied death. Implied waiting. Victoria was not willing to wait. She was accelerating the timeline. Engineering my removal so she could claim what she had decided was already hers. I saved each recording. Backed them up to the cloud storage Harrison had helped me configure. Each file dated, time-stamped, cataloged with the same precision I had used for patient charts. Evidence was only useful if it was organized. Disorganized evidence was just noise. The recordings accumulated. Victoria calling contractors for estimates. Victoria researching guardianship procedures on the living room laptop, screen visible to camera 1. Victoria practicing her concerned voice in the bathroom mirror, unaware that the hallway camera caught her adjusting her expression from neutral to worried in the space of 2 seconds, the way an actress might prepare for a scene. But recording 15 broke something in me that the others had not. It came on a Tuesday night. Camera 2, the kitchen. Late, nearly 11. Victoria and James sitting at my table, the table Bill had built, mugs of tea between them. James looked tired, the particular exhaustion of a man carrying guilt he refused to examine. She seems worse today, James said quietly. The thing with the stove this morning. She really did not remember turning it on. I had remembered perfectly. I had turned it on deliberately, let it run for 20 minutes, then performed confusion, when Victoria pointed it out. But James did not know that. James saw what Victoria had trained him to see. "I know, baby." Victoria reached across the table, took his hand. "That is why we are doing this." For her. A silence. James stared at his tea. Something moved across his face. A shadow. A question forming behind his eyes, rising toward the surface like a fish approaching light. "Sometimes I wonder if we should just talk to her. Maybe she could make her own decisions about, do not go soft on me now." Victoria's voice changed. The warmth dropped away like a mask removed between scenes. Underneath was something flat, practical, impatient. "We have been planning this for months. The doctor is on board. The facility has a room. We are this close, James. This close. Do not start second-guessing because you feel guilty." James said nothing. The shadow retreated. The question sank back beneath the surface, unanswered, unasked. He squeezed her hand and nodded. A small, defeated motion. The surrender of a man who had stopped trusting his own instincts years ago. I watched this recording 3 times. Not for evidence. I had plenty of that. I watched it because somewhere in those 30 seconds, my son had almost been brave. Almost questioned the woman dismantling his mother's life. Almost chosen me. Almost. The word tasted like ash. I turned off the iPad. Sat in Bill's workshop in complete darkness, surrounded by tools that had built beautiful things, listening to the crickets begin their spring chorus outside. James's silence on that recording was not absence. It was presence. He was there, at my table, hearing his wife dismiss his conscience, and he chose compliance over courage. Not because he was evil, because he was weak. And weakness. I had learned in 35 years of nursing, in 35 years of watching families make decisions that determined whether vulnerable people were protected or abandoned, weakness was the most common form of cruelty. The cameras kept recording. Victoria kept planning. And I kept watching. Night after night. Building a case from the words of people who believed no one was listening. The recordings accumulated the way evidence accumulates in a long investigation. Slowly. Then. All at once. By the end of March, I had 30 recordings saved to the iPad in Bill's workshop. 30 moments of Victoria speaking without filter, planning without caution, revealing the architecture of her scheme in pieces that, assembled, formed a blueprint as clear as any building plan. Recording 23. Victoria on the phone with a lawyer. Not Harrison. Her lawyer. A man whose name I did not recognize, whose voice came through tinny on the speaker. For the guardianship petition, you will need documented evidence of cognitive decline. Medical evaluations, witness statements, a pattern of incidents over time. I have all of that, Victoria said. The psychiatrist has already done 1 evaluation. We have a 2nd scheduled. I have been keeping detailed notes on every incident. Good. 2 medical evaluations and consistent documentation should be sufficient. The court will appoint its own evaluator as well, but if your records are thorough, the outcome is generally predictable. Generally predictable. My life reduced to a legal probability. The outcome of decades of independence, weighed against a notebook, full of manufactured symptoms, and a doctor who had seen exactly what I wanted him to see. Recording 31. Camera 1, the parlor. Evening. Victoria and James on the sofa. Her laptop open between them. The screen showing what appeared to be a legal document template. When we go before the judge, keep it simple, Victoria said. Her voice had the quality of a director coaching an actor. Patient, but firm. Allowing no improvisation. Say that your mother has been declining for months. That you are worried about her safety. That she cannot manage her finances or daily activities without assistance. Use specific examples. The stove. The keys. In the freezer. The name. Confusion. I know, James said. Do not get emotional. Judges respond to calm concern, not dramatics. And do not mention the house, not once. This is about her well-being. Understand? We care about her. We want her safe. That is the story. The story. She called it a story. Because that was what it was. Fiction, carefully plotted, rehearsed, and ready for performance. The only difference between her story and mine was that mine would have evidence behind it. Recording 38. Camera 3, the sugar bowl. Victoria at the dining table with a laptop and a calculator. Contractor estimates spread before her. She was on the phone, voice animated with the particular energy of someone spending money they had not yet acquired. So for the kitchen, if we take out the wall between the kitchen and the dining room, open concept, new cabinets, quartz countertops, we are looking at what? She typed numbers. 55,000. And the bathrooms? All three? More typing. Another 40. So roughly 95 total for the major renovations, and then staging costs on top of that. What kind of return are we looking at on a 2.1 listing? She was budgeting my home's destruction before she had even filed the paperwork to take it from me. Planning renovations for a house she did not own. Spending money from accounts she could not legally access. Designing a future built entirely on the assumption that a 67-year-old woman would be removed from her own life without resistance. I saved each recording with the clinical detachment I had cultivated over decades. Date, time, camera number, content summary. Backed up to the cloud, copied to a USB drive Harrison kept in his office safe. Redundancy was not paranoia. It was preparation. Then came recording 47, April 2nd, 8:43 in the evening. Camera 2, the kitchen, Victoria, and James at the table. Dinner dishes still in the sink. Victoria held James's phone, not hers, thumbing through screens with the familiarity of someone who had done this before. "Let me check something," she said, almost to herself. She opened an application, typed, waited. The screen reflected in her eyes. I could not see what was on it from the camera angle, but I did not need to. Her next words told me everything. 230,000 in savings. She said the number slowly, tasting each digit. Plus 41,000 in checking. And the pension deposits. 3,000 a month. Like clockwork. She scrolled further. No outstanding debts. The house is paid off. Property tax is current. She had my banking password. Had accessed my accounts through an app on James's phone. Had been monitoring my finances the way a predator monitors prey. Tracking movements. Calculating vulnerabilities. Waiting for the optimal moment to strike. Victoria set the phone down. Looked at James. And smiled. "Baby. When the old lady signs into Shady Oaks, we are finally set." The old lady. I paused the recording. Sat in the darkness of Bill's workshop. Let the words settle into my chest. The old lady. Not Mom. Not Eleanor. Not your mother. The old lady. A designation stripped of name, of identity, of personhood. A label for an obstacle to be moved. A problem to be solved. A line item in a renovation budget. I had bathed patients who called me by name within minutes of meeting me. I had held hands of strangers who treated me with more recognition than my own daughter-in-law used when discussing my removal from my own life. I played the recording again. Watched Victoria's face as she said it. No hesitation. No self-correction. No flicker of awareness that she was talking about a human being. The old lady. Spoken the way someone might refer to an aging appliance that needed replacing. James sat across from her. He heard it. The old lady. His mother. And he did nothing. Said nothing. Just looked at the table and nodded the way. He always nodded when Victoria finished speaking. A small, automatic gesture of surrender that had become so habitual he probably did not even notice it anymore. I saved the recording, number 47. Then I closed the iPad, slid it back into the drawer beneath the sandpaper, and sat in Bill's chair for a long time. 47 recordings. 47 proofs that the people living in my house saw me not as a mother, not as a person, but as an obstacle between them and $2 million worth of historic real estate. Outside, the magnolia tree caught April wind. Its branches moved in patterns that looked like reaching, like grasping, like hands closing around something they intended to keep. I understood the feeling. Bill had designed a trap. I had built the evidence to arm it. 47 recordings sat on a drive in Harrison's safe, each one a strand in a web that Victoria had woven around herself without realizing it. She thought she was the spider. She did not know she was the fly. The court papers arrived on the first Monday of April, hand-delivered by a process server in a gray polo shirt who apologized twice and could not meet my eyes. I stood in the doorway holding the envelope, letting the morning sun warm my face, while the weight of what it contained registered somewhere deep and quiet. Eleanor Grace Whitfield, respondent. In the matter of guardianship petition, filed by James Arthur Whitfield and Victoria Palmer Whitfield. Petitioners. Victoria appeared behind me before I had finished reading the cover page. She must have been watching from the living room, waiting for this moment the way a stage manager waits for a cue. Mom. Her voice arrived wrapped in concern, so practiced it could have been laminated. Come inside. Let me explain. She guided me to the parlor, sat me in my chair, took the chair across from me, the one Bill used to read in, and leaned forward with her elbows on her knees. The posture of intimacy, the geometry of manipulation. This is not what it looks like, she said. It is a legal formality. The doctors have noticed some changes, and we just want to make sure you are protected, that your finances are managed properly, that someone is looking out for your interests. My interests. She said the word without irony, without hesitation, without any apparent awareness that the woman whose interests she claimed to protect was the same woman whose medication she had hidden, whose mail she had stolen, whose banking password she had compromised, whose house she had already shown to a real estate agent. We love you, Mom. This is for your safety. Nothing is going to change. Everything was going to change. She just did not know in which direction. I let my hands shake. Let my eyes fill with the kind of watery confusion I had been perfecting for weeks. Let my voice crack when I spoke. I do not understand. Am I in trouble? No. No. Of course not. Victoria reached forward, took my trembling hands. Her grip was firm and warm, the grip of a woman holding something she intended to keep. It is just paperwork. The court will send someone to talk to you, and then everything will be sorted out. You do not need to worry about a thing. One less thing. The lullaby again. I nodded slowly, let my shoulders slump, let myself look small and frightened, and exactly as helpless as she needed me to be. James stood in the hallway. I could see him through the parlor doorway, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, staring at the floor. He had not come in, had not offered comfort or explanation, just stood there, occupying the margins of a moment that would determine his mother's future. Unable to step forward, unable to step away. I excused myself to the bedroom, closed the door, sat on the bed where Bill had died, and where I still slept every night with his pillow on the left side, untouched. Then I picked up the phone I kept in my nightstand drawer, the one Victoria did not know about, and called Harrison. They filed, Arthur. A pause. The sound of a chair shifting. Then Harrison's voice. Measured. And precise. Good. The clause is now activated. The moment that petition was stamped by the clerk, every provision in Bill's addendum became legally binding. If the court proceeds to a hearing, and the petition is evaluated, the trust transfers automatically. When is the hearing? I will check with the court. But guardianship cases in Chatham County are typically scheduled within 21 to 28 days of filing. I will push for the earliest date. The sooner this reaches a courtroom, the sooner it ends. 21 days. 3 weeks of continuing the performance. 3 weeks of shuffling through my own house pretending to be someone I was not. Living with people who had just signed legal documents requesting the right to control my life, my money, and my home. Can you manage? Harrison asked. I have managed this far. That you have. I will file our response within the week. And Ellie, start reviewing the recordings. We will need to select the most impactful ones for presentation. Not all 47. Choose the ones that tell the story most clearly. The story. Our story. The real one. After I hung up, I sat on the bed for several minutes. Outside my window, the live oaks swayed with the patient indifference of things that had seen centuries pass. They did not care about guardianship petitions or hidden clauses or daughters-in-law who measured rooms by their resale value. They simply grew, endured, stood their ground. That afternoon, while I was supposed to be napping, I heard footsteps downstairs, multiple sets. I crept to the top of the staircase and listened. Victoria's voice, bright and performative. The voice she used for people she wanted to impress. The original hardwood runs throughout the first floor. Heart pine. You can see the grain. And the crown molding is all original. 1860s craftsmanship. A second voice. Male. Professional. Beautiful details. The historic designation adds value, but limits exterior modifications. Interior, though. You have a lot of freedom. She had brought the real estate agent inside. Into my home. While I was upstairs in the bed I shared with Bill for 4 decades, she was walking a stranger through our rooms, pointing out selling features, discussing modifications, treating the house like a property listing instead of someone's life. I returned to the bedroom. Did not go downstairs. Did not confront. Instead, I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The same ceiling I had stared at on the nights Bill was too sick to speak. And counted. 21 days. That evening I went to the workshop, opened my notebook, wrote the date. Below it, I drew 21 small squares in 3 rows of 7, like a calendar. I filled in the first square with a small X. 20 more to go. In the margins, I wrote a single line. Something Bill used to say before every operation, every mission, every decisive moment. In a career built on patience and precision. Never fear the battle. Fear the soldier who does not prepare for it. I had prepared. The cameras were recording. The clause was activated. The evidence was organized. Harrison was filing our response. Mama Lou was ready to testify. And somewhere in a courthouse filing cabinet, a petition sat with James and Victoria's signatures on it, a document they believed would grant them control of my life, but would instead detach them from everything they thought they were about to gain. Victoria believed she was 21 days from victory. She did not know she was 21 days from losing everything. I capped the pen, closed the notebook, turned off the workshop light. 20 days now. The Queen had spent long enough disguised as a pawn. Harrison's study had become a war room over 3 weeks. Evidence covered his desk in organized stacks. USB drives labeled by date. Printed transcripts of key recordings. Bank statements showing 7 years of financial support. My notebook. The real one. With every performance cataloged and dated. The independent medical evaluation I had obtained in secret 2 weeks prior. That evaluation had been the riskiest move of the entire operation. I needed to leave the house for 2 hours, without Victoria knowing where I went or why. I chose a morning when she had scheduled a second phone call with the guardianship lawyer, a conversation that typically consumed her attention completely. I told James I wanted to attend morning service at St. John's. He offered to drive me. I declined, said the walk would do me good. He did not argue. Guilt made him accommodating in small ways that cost him nothing. Instead of the church, I took a taxi to a neurologist on East Liberty Street. A doctor who had no connection to Dr. Reeves. No contact with Victoria. No reason to see me as anything other than a new patient requesting a cognitive assessment. The evaluation lasted 90 minutes. Every test Victoria's hired psychiatrist had given me, I now completed, without performance, without hesitation, without a single manufactured error. Clock drawing, perfect. Date recall, perfect. Word memory, serial subtraction, executive function, all within normal ranges for a woman of 67 in excellent health. The neurologist handed me the written report with a puzzled expression. Mrs. Whitfield, I am not sure why you felt you needed this. Your cognitive function is well above average for your age group. There are no indicators of decline whatsoever. I needed it documented, I said. By someone independent. He did not ask why. Doctors learn not to question when patients wanted their competency on paper. He signed the report, stamped it, and wished me well. That report now sat in Harrison's war room beside 47 recordings, a notebook full of evidence, and the blue envelope containing Bill's anti-duress clause. Together, they formed an arsenal that would dismantle everything Victoria had spent months constructing. We will not use all 47 recordings, Harrison said during our final preparation meeting 3 days before the hearing. Too many, and we lose the judge's attention. We need the ones that tell the story in the fewest possible strokes. We selected 7. Recording 3. The real estate agent call. Recording 7. The nursing home reservation. Recording 15. James's moment of hesitation and Victoria's command not to go soft. Recording 31. Victoria coaching James on courtroom testimony. Recording 38. The contractor estimates. Recording 47. The banking breach and the old lady. And one I had almost overlooked. Recording 29. Victoria in the bathroom, practicing her concerned expression in the mirror, adjusting her face from neutral to worried in 2 seconds flat. The most damning 2 seconds on any of the recordings, because it showed not just what she was doing, but how deliberately she was performing it. That one, Harrison said when I played it for him, will end the case. Mama Lou came to Harrison's office the day before the hearing. She arrived in her church dress, white gloves, a handbag large enough to hold conviction. Tell me what you need me to say, she said, sitting across from Harrison with the posture of a woman who had never been intimidated by authority. Just what you have seen. How long you have known Eleanor. Her mental state. Before and after Victoria moved in. The isolation. Victoria, blocking your visits. I can do better than that, Mama Lou said. I can tell them what that woman said to me on my front porch last month when she thought Ellie was napping. She leaned over the fence and asked me whether I thought the neighborhood association would approve a modern renovation on a historic property. Asked me like she already owned the place. Harrison wrote it down. Looked at me. We are ready. That night, I went home and performed one final evening of confusion. Fumbled with the television remote. Asked James what time dinner was twice, within 10 minutes. Went to bed early, complaining of headache. Victoria documented each incident in her notebook with the satisfied efficiency of a woman who believed she was closing a deal. I lay in bed until the house fell silent. Until Victoria's breathing settled through the heating vent. Until James stopped pacing. Until the only sounds were the creaking of old wood and the distant rhythm of Abercorn Street at midnight. Then I rose. Put on my robe. Walked downstairs and through the back door to the balcony. The night was warm for late April. Savannah had decided spring was staying, and the air carried jasmine and something green, the smell of things growing in darkness. The live oaks stood black against a sky scattered with stars, their branches heavy with Spanish moss that moved in the breeze like curtains in a house with open windows. I sat in my chair. Bill's chair sat empty beside me. 1 cup of tea on the railing, the way it had been every morning and evening since he died. 1 cup. 1 person. 7 years of solitude bookended by a marriage that gave me everything and a family that tried to take it away. Tomorrow, Bill, I said to the darkness, they will find out who they have been living with. The stars offered no response. They never did. But the magnolia tree caught the wind and released a scent so sweet it ached, and for a moment, just a moment, the empty chair beside me felt less empty, as though someone was sitting in it, listening, approving, proud. I went inside, climbed the stairs, opened my closet. The navy dress hung at the far end, behind winter coats and scarves I rarely wore. Bill had always loved this dress. Said it made me look like a woman who could run the world and still be home for dinner. I had not worn it since his funeral. I laid it across the chair beside the bed, set my good shoes beneath it, placed Bill's photograph on the nightstand, facing the dress, as though he were inspecting my uniform before deployment. Tomorrow, I would walk into a courtroom as a confused old woman on her son's arm. I would shuffle. I would blink. I would let Victoria believe, one final time, that her performance had succeeded. And then I would stop performing. I set the alarm for 5, turned off the light, lay in the dark, listening to the house breathe around me. This house that had held my life for 39 years, and would hold it for 39 more if I had anything to say about it. Sleep came easily. The deep, unbroken sleep of a woman who had stopped being afraid and started being ready. Chatham County Courthouse smelled like old wood in consequence. The building sat on Montgomery Street, limestone and columns, the kind of architecture designed to make people feel small before the law. I had been inside once before, years ago, testifying in the Henderson case. That time I walked in as an expert witness. This time I walked in as the respondent. James held my arm as we climbed the front steps. I leaned into him slightly, letting my weight shift with each step. The shuffle I had perfected over 3 months of performance. My navy dress felt like armor beneath the appearance of frailty. My good shoes clicked softly on the stone. Victoria walked ahead of us. Black blouse, gray slacks, minimal jewelry. The costume of a woman burdened by responsibility rather than driven by ambition. She carried a leather folder that I knew contained her notebook, Dr. Reeves's evaluation, and whatever other documentation her lawyer had assembled to prove that Eleanor Whitfield could no longer manage her own life. Courtroom B was smaller than I expected. Oak benches, fluorescent lighting, the state seal on the wall behind the judge's bench. No jury. Guardianship hearings were decided by a single judge. This one was a woman in her late 50s, gray hair pinned back, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Judge Catherine Hartley. Harrison had told me about her. Fair. Thorough. Did not tolerate performances. Good. There would be only one more performance today, and it would not last long. We took our seats. Victoria and James on the left with their attorney, a man named Pruitt who wore his confidence like aftershave. Harrison and I on the right. Mama Lou sat in the gallery behind us, white gloves folded in her lap, expression carved from granite. Pruitt opened. His voice carried the smooth certainty of a man presenting facts he believed to be unassailable. Your Honor, we are here today because James and Victoria Whitfield, devoted family members, have witnessed a significant and progressive decline in the cognitive function of Eleanor Whitfield, age 67. Over the past several months, Mrs. Whitfield has exhibited repeated instances of confusion, memory loss, disorientation, and an inability to manage routine tasks including medication, cooking, and financial matters. We respectfully request that the court appoint James Whitfield as legal guardian with full authority over Mrs. Whitfield's personal and financial affairs. Full authority. The words dropped into the courtroom like stones into still water. Full authority over my home, my savings, my decisions, my life. Dr. Reeves testified first. Professional, measured, careful. He described his evaluation, the clock drawing, the word recall, the serial subtraction, noted the areas of concern, used phrases like consistent with early-stage decline and warrants ongoing monitoring. He did not diagnose dementia. He was too careful for that. But he laid the groundwork for someone else to. Then James took the stand. My son, 41 years old. wearing the suit I had bought him for his law school graduation, sitting in a witness chair, swearing an oath to tell the truth, preparing to lie about his mother. "Can you describe the changes you have observed in your mother's behavior?" Pruitt asked. James cleared his throat, looked at Victoria. That glance, that automatic check-in, lasted less than a second, but told me everything about who was directing this testimony. "My mother has been showing signs of decline for several months," he said. The words came out measured, rehearsed, exactly as Victoria had coached him in recording 31. "She confuses names. She called me by my father's name multiple times. She leaves the stove on. She put her keys in the freezer and could not remember doing it. She gets lost in her own garden. And her financial management? She has always been responsible with money, but lately she has been confused about bills, about account balances. We are worried she could be taken advantage of. Taken advantage of." The irony was so sharp it nearly cut me. I sat motionless, hands folded, expression vacant, the mask firmly in place. Then Victoria. She approached the witness stand the way she approached everything. With preparation, with intention, with the understanding that every gesture was being evaluated. She sat down, folded her hands, and let her eyes fill with tears that arrived on cue, like actors responding to a stage direction. "It breaks my heart," she said, her voice cracking at precisely the right moment. "Eleanor raised the most wonderful man I have ever known. She is the reason our family exists. Watching her decline has been the hardest thing we have endured as a family." She paused, dabbed her eyes with a tissue she had brought specifically for this moment. The judge watched her, with an expression I could not read. "All we want is for her to be safe," Victoria continued. "To know that someone is looking out for her, that her finances are protected, that her health is monitored, that she is cared for the way she deserves. The way she deserves." Each word a masterpiece of deception, delivered with the sincerity of a woman who had hidden my medication, intercepted my mail, stolen my banking password, and reserved a room at a facility where she planned to store me while she gutted my kitchen and sold my home. Pruitt rested his case. The judge made a note. Then she turned to our side of the courtroom. "Mr. Harrison, does the respondent wish to address the court?" Harrison stood. "She does, Your Honor." Judge Hartley looked at me. Her eyes were careful, assessing. The eyes of a woman who had heard hundreds of these cases and learned to look beyond the surface. "Mrs. Whitfield, do you understand these proceedings? Do you wish to respond?" This was the moment. 3 months of performance. 3 months of hiding inside a mask of confusion, while the people I loved dismantled my life, piece by piece. 3 months of swallowed rage and calculated patience and nights spent in a dead man's workshop, documenting evidence by the light of a hidden iPad. I released James's arm. He looked at me, startled by the sudden absence of my weight against his side. I stood, not the slow, uncertain rising I had performed for weeks. I stood the way Bill taught me to stand when something mattered. Straight-backed, shoulders level, chin raised. The posture of a woman who had spent 35 years walking hospital corridors with authority, making decisions that determined whether people lived or died. My eyes cleared. The fog I had worn like a veil lifted in a single breath, and beneath it was the woman I had been hiding since January. Sharp, present, absolutely, completely aware. "Your Honor." My voice filled the courtroom without effort, clear as a bell, steady as the live oaks outside these windows. "My name is Eleanor Grace Whitfield. I am a registered nurse with 35 years of clinical experience at Savannah Memorial Hospital. I have assessed, diagnosed, and treated patients with cognitive decline throughout my entire career." I paused. Let the silence work. Let the contrast between the woman they had described and the woman standing before the court settle into every corner of the room. I know precisely what cognitive decline looks like. And I know precisely what elder abuse looks like. What you have heard today, Your Honor, is the latter. The silence that followed lasted 4 seconds. I counted them the way I used to count heartbeats on a cardiac monitor. 4 seconds of Victoria's composure cracking. 4 seconds of James staring at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. 4 seconds of Judge Hartley's eyebrows rising 1 millimeter. Then settling. Then Harrison stood, opened his briefcase, removed a USB drive and a stack of printed transcripts. Your Honor, we have 47 video recordings we would like to present as evidence. Recorded inside the respondent's own home by the respondent herself, documenting a systematic campaign of elder abuse conducted by the petitioners over a period of 3 months. Victoria made a sound. Small. Involuntary. The sound of a trap closing around someone who never saw it coming. Harrison connected the USB drive to the courtroom display. The screen mounted on the wall flickered to life, and the first recording filled the room. Camera 2. The kitchen. Victoria standing at the counter, phone pressed to her ear. Voice bright and professional. 417 Abercorn Street, Historic District. Antebellum, 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, wraparound porch, original hardwood throughout. We are looking at comparable sales to understand current market positioning. The judge watched. Victoria's attorney shifted in his seat. Victoria herself sat perfectly still, the color draining from her face the way blood drains from a wound. Slowly at first. Then, all at once. Harrison let each recording play without commentary. He understood what every good trial lawyer understood. Evidence did not need narration. It needed silence around it. Space for the truth to occupy. Recording 7. The nursing home call. Victoria's voice filling the courtroom. Shady Oaks Assisted Living. We need a room. Semi-private is fine. My mother-in-law. Early onset cognitive decline. Probably permanent. Shady Oaks. Inda. Judge Hartley removed her reading glasses. Set them on the bench. A gesture so small it could mean nothing. Or everything. Recording 15. The kitchen, late evening. James and Victoria at the table. James's voice, hesitant, almost brave. Sometimes I wonder if we should just talk to her. Maybe she could make her own decisions about. Then Victoria. Sharp as a blade unsheathed. Do not go soft on me now. We have been planning this for months. The doctor is on board. The facility has a room. We are this close. I watched James in the courtroom as his own words played back to him. His head dropped. His hands gripped the edge of the table. He did not look at Victoria. He did not look at me. He looked at nothing. The way people look when they are seeing themselves clearly for the first time and cannot bear the view. Recording 29. The bathroom. Victoria standing before the mirror. Her face neutral, relaxed, the face of a woman with no particular emotion. Then, in the space of 2 seconds, she rearranged her features into an expression of deep concern, practiced it, adjusted the angle of her eyebrows, softened her mouth, tried again. The transformation was seamless, deliberate, and utterly damning. A murmur moved through the courtroom. Judge Hartley's eyes narrowed. Recording 31. Victoria coaching James on the sofa. When we go before the judge, keep it simple. Say your mother has been declining. Use specific examples. The stove. The keys. The name confusion. And do not mention the house. Not once. This is about her well-being. That is the story. Pruitt placed his hand on Victoria's arm. She shook it off. Recording 47. The one that mattered most. Camera 2. Victoria holding James's phone, scrolling through my banking application. $230,000 in savings. Plus $41,000 in checking. And the pension deposits. She looked at James. Smiled. Baby, when the old lady signs into Shady Oaks, we are finally set. The old lady. The words hung in the courtroom air like a verdict already delivered. Judge Hartley wrote something on her notepad. The pen moved with the deliberate pressure of someone recording a conclusion. Harrison paused the recordings. Turned to the judge. Your Honor, we would also like to call a character witness. Mrs. Louise Beaumont, the respondent's neighbor of 22 years. Mama Lou rose from the gallery, walked to the witness stand with the unhurried dignity of a woman who had never once in her life been afraid to speak the truth. I have known Eleanor Whitfield since she and Bill moved onto Abercorn Street, Mama Lou said. That woman is sharper than most people half her age. She maintained that house alone for 7 years after Bill's passing, paid her own bills, tended her own garden, drove her own car. Never once needed help with anything except occasionally reaching a high shelf. She paused, looked directly at Victoria. Since that woman moved in, Ellie stopped having visitors. Her calls were screened. I was turned away at the door and told she was having a bad day. And last month, Victoria leaned over my fence and asked whether the neighborhood association would approve a modern renovation on a historic property. Mama Lou's voice hardened. She asked me that while Ellie was upstairs in her own bed, in her own house, being told she was losing her mind, the courtroom was silent. Mama Lou returned to her seat. Harrison remained standing. One final matter, Your Honor. He opened a folder containing the trust documents. Colonel William Whitfield, the respondent's late husband, revised his living trust 3 weeks before his death. He included an anti-duress provision, which I will now read into the record. Harrison's courtroom voice filled the room with Bill's words. Should Eleanor Grace Whitfield be subjected to any guardianship petition filed by a beneficiary of this trust, all assets shall be irrevocably transferred to the Savannah Veterans Foundation. The petitioning party shall be permanently disinherited. Harrison looked at the judge. The petition before this court was filed by beneficiaries of the Whitfield Trust. The anti-duress provision activated automatically upon filing. We also submit an independent neurological evaluation conducted 3 weeks ago confirming that Mrs. Whitfield exhibits no cognitive decline whatsoever. Pruitt stood. Your Honor, we request a recess to. Denied. Judge Hartley did not look at him. She was reading the trust document Harrison had placed before her. The courtroom waited. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere outside, a car horn sounded on Montgomery Street. Ordinary life continuing, while extraordinary things happened inside these walls. Judge Hartley set down the document, removed her glasses, looked at Victoria, then at James, then at me. The petition for guardianship is denied. Her voice carried the weight of finality. The court finds no credible evidence of cognitive decline in the respondent. Furthermore, the recordings presented today raise serious concerns regarding potential elder abuse, financial exploitation, and fraud. I am referring this matter to the Chatham County District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. A temporary restraining order is hereby issued, prohibiting Victoria Whitfield from contacting or approaching the respondent. Victoria stood. Her chair scraped against the floor. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Whatever she intended to say came out as a sound rather than words. Raw, incoherent. The sound of a woman watching everything she had engineered collapse around her. A court officer stepped forward. Pruitt took Victoria's arm, pulling her back into her seat. She resisted briefly, then crumpled, the way structures crumple when the load-bearing walls are removed, all at once and completely. James had not moved, had not spoken. He sat with his hands flat on the table, staring at a point somewhere beyond the courtroom wall, beyond the building, beyond anything I could reach. My son, 41 years old, learning in real time that the woman he had followed into this courtroom had led him off a cliff. I did not wait for the proceedings to conclude. Harrison nodded. I stood, collected my purse, and walked toward the courtroom doors. No shuffle, no uncertainty, no performance. I walked the way I had walked hospital corridors for 35 years. Straight-backed, steady, purposeful. The way Bill walked when he wore his uniform. the way a woman walks when she has reclaimed something that was always hers. The courthouse doors opened onto April sunlight. The live oaks lining Montgomery Street caught the afternoon light and held it, turning everything gold. Behind me, I heard Victoria's voice rising, arguing with Pruitt, demanding something that no longer existed. James sat somewhere in that courtroom, silent, the way he had been silent through all of this. I did not look back. Bill's voice came to me then. Not memory. Presence. The warm, steady certainty of a man who had always known exactly who his wife was. Proud of you, Ellie. Always was. I kept walking. The sunlight was warm on my face. The oaks swayed above me, and somewhere in a courthouse behind me, a blue envelope and 47 recordings were doing what truth had always done when finally given the chance to speak. They were setting someone free. The locksmith arrived at 9 the next morning. This time, I was the one changing the locks. I stood in my doorway, coffee in hand, watching him work. The same back door Victoria had changed in February. The same brass hardware Bill had installed 20 years ago, now replaced with a new deadbolt and 2 keys. Both mine. When he finished, I locked the door, unlocked it, locked it again. The mechanism turned smooth and certain, the sound of ownership restored. Victoria and James had left before dawn. I heard them packing in the dark, car doors closing, the engine fading down Abercorn Street. No goodbye. No note. Just absence where invasion had been. Over the following days, I dismantled 7 years of financial support with the same methodical patience I had used to build the case that freed me. Car insurance for James, canceled. The monthly transfers for their mortgage supplement, stopped. Tuition payments for the grandchildren's private school, redirected to a savings account in their names that their parents could not touch. Each phone call took less than 10 minutes. Each one felt like removing a thorn I had been walking on so long I had forgotten the pain. Harrison called midweek with updates. The district attorney had opened a formal investigation into elder abuse. Victoria faced potential felony charges for financial exploitation and fraud. James's involvement as a co-petitioner had triggered a review by the state bar, his law license suspended pending investigation. And the trust? I asked. Activated as written. The petition triggered the anti-duress clause. James and Victoria are permanently disinherited. The house, the accounts, everything remains yours. Bill's last operation, executed from 7 years beyond the grave. Flawless. The weeks that followed held a quality I had not experienced in years. Lightness. The particular weightlessness of a life no longer shaped by other people's expectations. I woke each morning, made my tea, sat on the balcony in my chair. Bill's chair sat empty beside me, the way it always had. But the emptiness felt different now. Less like absence, more like space. Room I had earned. May arrived with jasmine and humidity and the sound of savanna settling into summer. I planted a magnolia sapling in the front garden, right where the old tree had dropped its white petal the day Victoria moved in. The sapling was small, barely 18 inches, but its roots were strong and its leaves were green, and it leaned toward the sun with the patient determination of something that intended to last. Mama Lou helped me open the garden to the neighborhood. Weekends, people came with seeds and soil, and the easy conversation of strangers becoming friends. I taught a first aid course at Street John's on Tuesday evenings, started writing the memoir Bill had always wanted me to write. Sitting at his workbench each morning, laptop beside his tools, the smell of sawdust mixing with coffee, I filled the bookshelf in the parlor with novels I had been meaning to read for decades. Joined a walking group that met at Forsyth Park on Saturdays. Had dinner with Harrison once a month, where we talked about Bill and the law and the particular grace of people who planned for the worst while hoping for the best. Summer burned through August and cooled into September. The magnolia sapling had grown 3 inches. My memoir had grown 3 chapters. Victoria and James had divorced in July. Harrison told me. I did not ask for details. Victoria left Savannah. Where she went was no longer my concern. A Thursday evening in late September. The air had softened the way it does when Savannah decides summer is finally finished. I was in the garden, watering the roses Mama Lou had given me, when I heard a car pull into the driveway. An engine I recognized. James's old Honda. The one I had helped him purchase years ago. The door opened. He stepped out. Alone. He looked older than 41. Thinner. The way people look when they have been carrying shame instead of eating properly. His suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a shirt that needed ironing. He stood beside the car for a long moment, looking at the house as though asking permission to approach something he had tried to steal. I set down the watering can. Waited. He walked to the porch steps. Stopped. Looked at me with eyes that held nothing I had seen in them for years. No avoidance. No rehearsal. No Victoria behind them, pulling strings. "Can I come in, Mom?" I stepped aside. He entered slowly. The way a person enters a place they once called home and no longer have the right to. We stood in the foyer. The magnolia figurine watched from the mantel, its camera long since removed. The house smelled like jasmine and old wood, and the particular warmth of a place that had survived what tried to break it. Coffee? Old habits. Hospitality, deeper than hurt. That would be nice. We sat at the kitchen table. Bill's table. The same surface where Victoria had counted my savings on a stolen phone. Where James had nodded while his wife called me. The old lady. Where I had sat on a January morning, alone with cold tea, wondering if my son still loved me. He wrapped his hands around the mug, stared into it for a long time. When he spoke, his voice came out rough and stripped of everything, except what was left after you removed the excuses. "Mom, I became someone Dad would be ashamed of." I said nothing. Let the sentence sit between us. He needed to carry it without anyone making it lighter. I knew what Victoria was doing. Maybe not all of it, but enough. And I said nothing. Did nothing. I let her because it was easier than standing up. And I told myself it was for your own good. Because that was easier than admitting I was a coward. He looked up. His eyes were red. Not from performance. From the raw, unglamorous aftermath of a man meeting the truth about himself. "I am sorry. For the petition. For the lies. For 10 years of taking your money and giving you nothing but silence. You deserved better. You deserved a son." The apology hung in the air. I turned it over. Looked for manipulation. Found only exhaustion and shame and what appeared to be the beginning of something that might, with time, become genuine understanding. "I forgive you," I said. His shoulders dropped. Relief or grief? Maybe both. But James, things cannot go back to what they were. I will never again be your safety net. I will never fund your life while being treated as optional. You are here now. That matters. What happens next depends entirely on whether you mean what you said. I mean it. Then show me. Not today. Over time, I stood. Walked to the stove. Put the kettle on. And for the first time, in 7 years, I took 2 cups from the shelf. 2 cups. Chamomile, with honey. I carried them through the house. Past Bill's reading chair, past the magnolia figurine, past the photographs on the hallway wall, out through the French doors to the balcony. I set 1 cup on the railing beside my chair. Set the other on the railing beside Bill's chair. Then I sat down and gestured for James to take the seat that had been empty since his father died. He sat. Picked up the cup. Held it without drinking. As though the warmth in his hands was enough. "You know what your father was most proud of?" I said. Not never making mistakes. He was proud of standing back up after making them. The crickets had started their evening chorus. The live oaks swayed above us, Spanish moss moving like curtains in a house with open windows. The magnolia sapling in the garden stood 3 inches taller than the day I planted it, leaning toward the last light. For the first time in 7 years, there were 2 cups of tea on the balcony. Not like before. Nothing would ever be like before. But sitting there with my son in the September evening, listening to the crickets and the oak trees and the old house settling around us, I felt something I had not felt since Bill sat in that chair. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter. The feeling of a life returned to the person who built it. The feeling of boundaries as solid as the walls Bill framed with his own hands. The feeling of love redefined. Not as endless giving, but as truth spoken and consequences honored, and forgiveness offered, without erasing what made it necessary. The evening turned the sky gold, then amber, then deep violet. The magnolia sapling caught the last light and held it. The way young things hold on to what they need to grow. If this story reached your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear that standing up for yourself is not cruelty. It is the deepest kind of love. And if you have not already, subscribe to this channel so you do not miss stories that remind us it is never too late to become who you were meant to be. The tea grew cool in our cups. The crickets sang. And on the balcony of a house that remembered everything, a mother and her son sat together, learning a new language. One that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with grace.